when New Yorkers open their newspapers in the morning and read headlines of success, not scandal. Most of all, it will be felt by each New Yorker when the city they love finally loves them back. Together, New York, we're going to freeze the... Together, New York, we're going to make buses fast and... Together, New York, we're going to deliver universal... Let the words we've spoken together, the dreams we've dreamt together, become the agenda we deliver together. New York, this power, it's yours. This city belongs to you. Thank you.
Hello, humans. Coming at you with another detour here. I am doing this all live, one take. I've got a few notes with me, so that's going to be the name of the game here. But heard we had a little bit of an election yesterday evening. Multiple elections across the country, and many that are still being counted. Of course, California is going to count until the cows come home. But we also have election results that we are awaiting from Minneapolis, and we will see if Omar Fateh becomes successful there. There is another candidate in St. Paul, whose last name is Her. She won, and she had a similar kind of story to both. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but it begins with a K. And she's the first Hmong woman to be the leader of St. Paul, Minnesota, of course, the Twin City. And so that's a really good progressive race there that folks want to get to. But that's why I wrote notes, because I don't want to get distracted. So the premise of this video, the premise of this detour, rather, I want to congratulate Zohran Mamdani. I want to say that, you know, he made it. It's good. And I want to congratulate the campaigners, the supporters, the early endorsers, the people who helped not just in the primary, but from the primary to the general election, really drive home this victory. It's something that has galvanized and inspired people across the country, and that's something that just has to be said. Zohran Mamdani is becoming the first Muslim mayor, one of the youngest, if not the youngest, mayor in New York City history. He's the first modern DSA, Democratic Socialist of America, endorsed elected official to be mayor of a city of this size. And, you know, truly, great job. Like, November 5th, today, when we're talking about this, is the day that Zohran Mamdani woke up. He was on Good Morning America, literally, talking about his victory. And he probably woke up feeling like this was the best day of his life. You would think he woke up thinking that this is the best day of his life. It's maybe his second best. His first best was actually primary night, because he came from 1% when he started his campaign, his long shot campaign, from a council person from Queens. I don't know the exact name, because again, I'm kind of new to New York politics, so work with me. But he was like maybe a state assemblyman from Queens, and then he was pretty young at that too, and then makes the jump to run for mayor, and also run to get endorsed not just by the Democratic Socialists of America, which are not necessarily a political party, but, you know, a pretty robust organization at this point, with more than 10 years removed. I'll say at least 10 years removed from the Bernie Sanders campaign, which really put a lot of juice into DSA. But DSA and versions of socialist organizations working within the political system have existed for a long time, of course. But to overcome that, to come from 1% to winning, and not just winning, but thrashing Andrew Cuomo, the perceived incumbent, someone who is political royalty in the state of New York, in the city of New York, someone who has the name recognition for those reasons. I mean, his dad has a bridge named after him. His brother is a cable news host. He still overcame all of those odds. And again, you have to, he's young. He's a Muslim man. This is an Islamophobic country and a city with a lot of latent Islamophobia, misplaced a lot of Islamophobia post the Twin Tower attacks. But I really do think, and I really stand 10 toes on this, the best day of Zohran Mamdani's life, you know, political day. I'm sure when he married his wife was a good day. But the best day of Zohran Mamdani's political life was the day he won that primary. The second best day was some combination of yesterday and today when he actually won the race and, you know, is kind of getting to actually sort of start to lead with the mandate that he has. But I want to make no mistake here that Zohran Mamdani is now the mayor of New York City, which means we must welcome him to hell. Welcome to hell, Zohran Mamdani. Look around. You know, it's a lot better than Dick Cheney's recent digs, but your job as mayor of New York City, mayor of the 5 boroughs, mayor of the center of the tri-state area, mayor of the capital of the former capital of the United States, mayor of the capital, the financial capital of America, the international capital of the world. When you're mayor of this city, your job is to govern a fundamentally ungovernable city. It's chaotic. People are moving around. There's trains and all this transportation stuff happening all along. He has some stuff about public transportation to talk about. We'll get to that very soon. Trust me. But there's crumbling infrastructure that you just inherit by being the mayor. So anytime there's a pothole in any city in America, you know, the mayor, the city council, they get sort of blamed for that kind of thing. County, whoever handles that sort of thing. Imagine that on the most populous city in America, where everyone has less than zero patience for things. It's a famously corrupt city, especially politically. We are not removed from the same decade where the police department arrested the mayor's daughter. This happened to Bill de Blasio in 2020 during the George Floyd protest, because Bill de Blasio was showing a little bit too much support for the Black Lives Matter protesters who were saying all this stuff about defunding the police and being antagonistic towards especially abuse of force by police departments across the country, but very especially NYPD with their stop and frisk policies from previous mayors. And the NYPD arrested Bill de Blasio's daughter just to prove a point, just to prove they could, just to prove they could get away with it. It's a fundamentally corrupt city. And of course, a lot of national media is based in New York City or has a large presence in New York City. We also have some notable quote unquote local media like the New York Post, which are particularly salacious to anything that doesn't align with right-wing ideologies or, you know, trains of thought. And you're going to be facing political attacks like the one in the at least current thumbnail of this video, where Zohran Mamdani is holding a hammer and sickle. It's from the New York Post cover this morning. Again, the hammer and sickle is a symbol for communism. Even Andrew Cuomo had to admit at a certain point that Zohran Mamdani is not a communist. He's not trying to be a communist. Democratic socialism is different from communism. It's just a scare tactic. Anyone who went to college, which is everyone who worked the New York Post, knows that. They're just willfully being dishonest there. I say all that to say that being the mayor of a city, especially New York City, has its benefits. It also has its struggles. But you're going to be, for my Succession fans out there, a pain sponge for the entire experience. The buck stops with you, deservedly or not. And, you know, that's a lot of accountability to have. And that's a lot of pressure. And the pressure gets weary. And the pressure gets, it eats at you. It may start to eat at your friendships and relationships. It may start to eat at your ability to show up in public and be as slick as one is on the campaign trail in order to get to that point to maintain the sort of like bully pulpit that has been built by the momentum, the Mamdani momentum, if you will, from this recent win. And as I, try to hold this mic closer as the ambulance goes by, because what's more New York than that? Zohran ran and won partially on charm and charisma and positivity, and it only gets you so far when you're the mayor of Gotham. Charm, charisma, and positivity. It may work in an interview or in certain sticky situations, but more or less, it is just going to be a, people are going to want people to feel their pain, and that can work, but that's also going to have, it has to be a certain balance, and it's very difficult to manage with all the people and all the constituencies that are in New York City. So I'll speak to this as quickly as I can. He ran on 3 policies. One is universal childcare. The second is fast and free buses. And the third is freezing the rent. We played it in the clip in the beginning. I want to go through all 3 of these things just to say, like, what I like about these things and some of my concerns that will lead into my larger point that Zohran Mamdani is in hell. Universal childcare, I think, is, Zohran Mamdani said something earlier in his campaign that, and he said this in interviews as well, when people have joked about this sort of trope that, oh, if you're a socialist, you just want free things. You want, like, Kool-Aid to come out of the lunch counter and, 50-cent snacks, the vending machine, and all this other different stuff that's like, seems to be infeasible because you're all these other different tropes, right? I'm not going to go into the whole ideology here, but he has said many times in these interviews that he only makes promises he can keep. And I think the best example of that could be universal childcare. I might be wrong. I'm just kind of learning about this history as well. But New York City especially is probably the leading city in the United States when it comes to, the idea of the importance of childcare, the idea of providing it to as many people as possible, figuring out how to fund it, figuring out how to sustain it, whether you need federal funding or otherwise, building institutional support as well as grassroots support. Ever since before the New Deal and, spawned by the Great Depression, which was, after the Roaring 20s, which was 100 years ago, New York City was building a very robust system for universal childcare. It through the years they had gone from a city-based organization to, sorry, I was just looking up the article because I want to point to what had been written in The Conversation by Simon Black. He is an associate professor of labor studies at Brock University. And he's kind of like where I'm getting a lot of this information from. But basically, you have as far back as 1933 or 1934, when after the Works Projects Administration, which created a lot of the government, the alphabet soup of government agencies that are currently not being funded at time of recording. This created a bunch of new jobs, not just for the Great Depression economy, but what ultimately ended up being the lead up to the United States' participation in World War II. And it created so many jobs that not just men were working, which was the tradition at the time, but women started actually going into the workforce to some extent, especially in larger cities. This meant that you needed a system to take care of children. And 1933, New York had started developing that. You fast forward through 1941, and even more jobs end up going to war industries because you're fully into World War II. And Mayor LaGuardia at the time really wanted to prioritize funding these sort of like New Deal nurseries that were funded 10 years ago, where the federal funding had dried up. So like, you can fast forward and read through that history. Again, it's a piece in The Conversation by Simon Black about saying Zohran Mamdani's transformative childcare plan built on a history of New York City's social innovations. And it basically goes to the history of how time and time again, the federal government chooses to fund it, and then they don't fund it, and they choose to fund it, and then they take it away. And you can figure out which presidents do that and which they don't, and what their economic ideologies lie in, and where their economic influences lie in, and what their ideology is. You can map that out, the pattern. It's pretty clear. But New York City has remained resilient even when the federal government hasn't. And it was even Bill de Blasio, I believe, who was able to get universal pre-K available, pre-kindergarten available in New York City. So I think there's a lot to build on there. Universal childcare seems like the best they can go with. Fast and free buses. I have a saying about this. You can get any of these three. You can get fast, free, or safe, and you can only pick two. What I like about Zohran Mamdani's bus policy is that if you make the buses free, which is a piloted program that was done during COVID, not just in New York City, but in cities with much smaller budgets around the country, because it was an experiment. There are very few people riding the bus anyways. They want people to do it safely and with masks and social distancing at the time. But they were trying to get people to, use these systems more, because a lot of people had stopped traveling and doing a lot of these different things during the pandemic. Some people even got cars during this time. And so to say that it's impossible is not something that I subscribe to. However, as someone who's experienced New York City and also just like crowded places where you have bus rapid transit to begin with, especially like dense urban downtown areas, which is the large part of the New York City bus system, making up the gaps that the subways don't. The main thing that's stopping the buses from being fast is not necessarily them not being free. It's true that there's a time that it takes to pay the fare and, let all the people pay the fare and then get on the bus and then, sit down and to stop and then go and, to wait, to basically the time it takes to stop at a bus stop, get all the people and then leave, and all the stuff in between that. If you eliminate the payment, that's just like one piece of that. But we're assuming that people in New York City pay for the buses already, right? Like a lot of people just don't pay the fare. Bus drivers sometimes mention it, or they say you have to, or they try to stop you. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they try to like speak up and assert themselves through that like little tiny plexiglass that was, again, like a COVID era thing to stop the spread of germs. But you see a rise of bus agents and bus operators, subway operators even, less so subway operators, but bus operators everywhere across the country, who are harassed by people, sometimes because, people refuse to pay the fare, and then that stops the train, that stops the bus because there's some type of argument, and then maybe that person, maybe sometimes they leave, sometimes they don't, sometimes they have a weapon. It gets really hairy out there. And if you remove that point of friction, you will definitely make the buses safer for bus drivers. I think the statistic is somewhere around 40% of, violent events that happen towards bus drivers were reduced when you have free bus fare. So I think that's going to help. But in order to make the buses fast, you're also going to have to implement things that have been done in a lot of ways. Implement more bus lane cameras on buses, so you start to send violations to people who block the bus lanes where you have bus lanes. Introduce more bus lanes on a high frequency route so that they are more efficient. Introduce bus signal priority. These are things that sometimes trains have when they run on street level, is that if the train is coming, the train gets priority at the light, so all the other traffic has to stop so that the train can safely cross and no one else gets hit. If you do that for the buses, that allows the buses to be faster. You're going to need some technological innovations. One of these things was congestion pricing, which has already made buses in the congestion pricing zone in Manhattan move at least 8 to 10% faster, at least maybe more. I'm not necessarily sure, but it is a noticeable difference, if not all that significant. And it's a difference that you've seen replicated in other places around the world that have also implemented congestion pricing to allow for better transportation for pedestrians, cyclists, and people who are taking public transit. So I think we're going to need to see a lot more of a robust thing from that. And it's important that we ask for things from Zohran from there. And then my last piece is the rent freeze. So, you've already seen Zohran waffle on some aspects of this. He's said, I guess clarified that wanting to freeze the rent, which would happen just for rent stabilized tenants, which you can do as mayor and happened during COVID, which sets the precedent among other times to freeze it during times of economic duress, which if they haven't already been happening during the inflation of the past couple of years, it's going to definitely get worse through the stagflation we're likely looking at, speaking again right now in November of 2025 with all the stuff that Trump continues to do to the economy and the decreasing stake and hope in that economy. And so he's already said that, freezing the rent doesn't mean he doesn't want to also support landlords who want to be able to pay their mortgages, which sometimes, oftentimes come out of the rent, especially for larger buildings. But, these things are going to have some give and take, some people, especially when we're looking at a candidate who ran as a democratic socialist and, sometimes distances themselves from that when it makes sense and sometimes won't. The inherent issue with landlords, which is something that's been understood about capitalism, especially from a Marxist, democratic socialist or social democrat lens from all the way since the Renaissance period in Europe in the 1700s, pre-Marx really, is that in capitalism, everything and everyone produces value in order to keep it going, except for those who own property, because the property itself isn't necessarily producing value. It's what you put on it and how you choose to run it, and a bunch of other different factors that are largely out of your control. But property ownership is not inherently creating a product. It's taking a thing that's already there as land. And this is just not opinion. This is just this is the most conservative economists who are capitalists, the Adam Smiths of the world, where, if I did my libertarian pivot, I'd be singing them to the high heavens. They say this exact same thing too about landlords. It's a fundamental piece of not just a modern understanding of economics, but a modern understanding of the relationship between feudalism, capitalism, socialism, and everything else. So that fundamental difference between landlords and tenants, landlords who maybe landlords and tenants are both struggling in a financial sense in their own ways, maybe, big maybe. But there's always going to be that inherent fight between both the landlord class and the renter class. I call it the landlord class and the land serf class. If your landlord is giving you the landlord special and just painting over all the issues that are happening in the place, they're not fixing things, not fixing plumbing or electricity or whatever. The heat is bad and there are children, elderly in the building, whatever is the issue, you're going to have an unstoppable force. You have to deal with the fact that an unstoppable force and an immovable object are heading towards each other when you're talking about all these rent control kind of things. And all of these things mean not necessarily doom for Zohran Mamdani, but it means that everyone around him, and by this I mean honestly people who live in New York, regardless if they didn't vote at all or they voted for someone else who wasn't Mamdani, shout out Sliwa and whoever else is on the ballot, or people in the primary, or people who voted for Zohran. These are things that everyone's going to have to deal with, and Zohran Mamdani is going to have to become somewhat of a different person. So the question is, when you're the most hated person in New York City, arguably one of the most hated people in America, for reasons oftentimes out of your control, when you have corrupt forces in the media and the government and, you know, politics itself and business, all kind of working against you or trying to see how they can work you and get their own angle, it's, you know, similar to, you know, Zohran Mamdani's stance, where sometimes he'll say defund the police, other times he'll say let's keep the current NYPD commissioner in there, let's not make any changes to the NYPD's police budget, let's have the resources to hire mental health work so that police officers can work on crimes that involve big cars or elite or stealth cars or, you know, light weaponry or heavy weaponry, because those aren't many or most like mental health cases or resource cases where people are unhoused or any other type of thing like that. You're going to be making some people happy and pissing some people off. And the way politics is right now, some people may just like never forgive you for it. Remember, Eric Adams was pitched as someone who, yes, he was in the NYPD, but he put together like these briefs against discrimination against Black people. He put together these things. He was like, you know, the accountability cop type of cop. And now he's known as Mr. Nightlife, and he was so corrupt, he was basically about to sell out the city to Donald Trump. An entity that I'm not going to mention that much during this video, but like I have not even mentioned, which is going to be another sort of factor that Zohran's going to have to contend with here. So the job of being America's, you know, most hated person in America's city full of hate is definitely a big thing. But I do want to go back to one part of his speech last night that I thought was very interesting to kind of like round this out, and how the hell that Zohran Mamdani is could be made into a purgatory, or could at least be made a little bit better. You could at least maybe even get a second term, with a couple of recommendations I'm going to put in the table here. But I do want to start off with a little bit earlier in his speech. I was playing the end of it, but I will play the main part here.
Taxation and exploit tax breaks. We will stand alongside unions and expand labor protections, because we know, just as Donald Trump does, that when working people have ironclad rights, the bosses who seek to extort them become very small indeed. New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
Powerful stuff, truly.
So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us. When we enter City Hall in 58 days, expectations will be high. We will meet them. A great New Yorker once said that while you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose. If that must be true, let the prose we write still rhyme, and let us build a shining city for all.
So to that point, he quoted a great New Yorker once said that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. So hopefully the two rhyme, and that Zohran wants to meet all the expectations. And that's why he's very clearly laying out things that he thinks he can do. It's been talked about a lot that some of these things, especially when it comes to MTA funding, are going to have to go through the state government of New York. And I think that's totally fine. But I also want to note two things about that. One, that quote from the Great New Yorker is from Andrew Cuomo's dad. It was Mario Cuomo who had that quote. And I'll admit it was a bar, but there's a very distinct reason why he's not, mentioning that in the speech. Although, again, it could be interpreted as kind of graceful considering how polite Mamdani is to Cuomo's family and his heritage versus how Cuomo has been treating Mamdani as like some sort of like terrorist figure. But if I were to put my cynical hat on for a moment, I know it's a hopeful time and I'm going to get to hope in the end. But if I were to be cynical for a moment, Zohran knows everything I just said. And so he uses this quote to set expectations and curb people's enthusiasm. He knows that he hopes things rhyme, and this is his intention that he's setting right now and that he tries, but it's the reality that you can't get everything done. I think it's a very simple reality to say right now in like the post nut clarity of victory, but there are going to be some tough calls. There are going to be some tough situations. This is the second and final time I'm even going to mention Trump in this entire thing. There are going to be moments where Zohran pisses off the people who are already set to be angry at him. And then there are going to be the times where Zohran makes upset the people who felt like they really supported him and stuck their necks out for him and maybe worked on his campaign for hours or support him in some other way. And then they're going to feel betrayed. And then that's going to start some other different thing. Like this happens with every single politician. I think he knows it. It's smart to admit it. And so I think that's the honest reason. But, times are hard enough. And in big 2025, cynicism is the only abundance that we have. So let's really try to look at this in a hopeful way and say my hopeful but realistic take is that everyone who is having joy in this moment, good. I support you in that. I think it's important to be happy in the resistance. You should dance within the protest, of course, like when appropriate. But fight the power with your own power, and that can't always look like anger because that flame will die out very quickly. But if you like Zohran and you're in New York City or you want Zohran in your area, your time is now to fight. This shows what's going on. I want to shout out, we have a bunch of other progressive quote unquote races. The New Jersey governor won, the Virginia governor won. Both of those are Democratic gubernatorial wins. Both of those are a little bit more, moderate or centrist because those are bigger states with some conservative populations, but they have big population centers that are very progressive. They have big, younger, more liberal, more diverse in every single sense of the word populations there. And so even within some of that moderance, within some of that conservatism, you have signs that people are sick of Trump. And Omar Fateh, who is, didn't perform as well in the first round of voting, but at time of speaking may stand a chance in the second or third round of ranked choice voting. This is why I think ranked choice voting should be one of the top issues that leftists across the country really start to get enabled in their cities, because you're seeing so much actual potential and opportunity happen from these moments where you have ranked choice voting. Either way, you can even look at California's Proposition 50, where I was looking at the maps, and the most conservative areas of the state, your Riverside counties, your Orange counties, your Contra Costa counties, like I think even Fresno County, like places where it's like pretty much California, like Iowa, or like California, Nebraska, and it's just like farmland and nothing else, and religion and guns. Like it's even those places pretty substantially voted for the yeah, if Texas is going to cheat the system and give themselves 5 more Republicans, then California gets more Democrats. Sorry. Like, you got Republicans to vote for that in California. So there's so much more to go on. There are a couple of other like local races I need to look into. Like in Atlanta, there was like a judges race where there's a lot of conservatives up, I think, that I was only hearing about on election day, unfortunately. More on that on Power Report this week. But there's so much to be hopeful for around the country. And there's so much to be hopeful for locally. The tides are shifting, and now it's a moment for us to work with this in our communities to start to like sharpen our own messaging and how we communicate that with people, because what we're up against are a bunch of Chuck Schumers and Hakeem Jeffrieses who are going to try to claim this for themselves, and we can't let that happen. This victory was too great, and hopefully it's the sign of more victories to come. I was mentioning this, and this will also be on Power Report, because I got to interview some people who are at a Zohran Mamdani celebration, election night watch party in New York City. And you can watch some of that on thispace.tv. I'll try to link to it below in the description after this goes up. And you also had you had so many people out there who were cautiously optimistic, and you had so much like energy there and joy, and it's very difficult to see large groupings of that around politics these days. But truly know that that's out there. But the centrists, those are elected centrists, are going to try to create their own narrative that because the Virginia governor or the New Jersey governor, because they won, it's a sign to go more moderate. This happens all the time. We know the truth. The liberal wine moms know the truth. The aunties know the truth. Like, let's go. Let's get into it. Truly, there's never been a better time where the power is within us. Thank you for watching. Shout out to the folks who are watching live. I see Sandy from Left of the Box, who was also part of the This Space live stream last night. Shout out to Pinkerbell. Shout out to Nachiket. Shout out to Bad Lefty as always, and Rosalba. And so, yeah, I appreciate you all, and I will talk to y'all soon. Cheers. Peace. Bye bye.